Hello and welcome to the 77th episode of Jazzology presented by Savage Content. I'm your host, Willard Jenkins, and we're here alternating Fridays giving two jazz fans the opportunity to win $100. Each contestant will be asked questions worth 2 points. If they are unable to answer correctly, their opponent will have a chance to steal the question for 1 point. We'll ask 10 questions, and at the end of the 10 questions, the person with the lowest score will get a bonus question for the opportunity to tie the score, no matter how far they're behind in the score. If they're successful, the game will go to sudden death. The person in the lead at the end of the regulation will go first, and each contestant will take turns trying to answer the sudden death multiple choice question until we have a winner. And now let's meet this week's contestants. Our returning champion for this 77th episode of Jazzology is Ted Panken, a jazz journalist and former jazz history professor. Ted Panken has written extensively for DownBeat, Jazziz, and Jazz Times magazines, as well as for the New York Times, the New York Daily News, and assorted other publications. Ted Panken has written more than 500 liner notes. But he's about to meet his match in that department. For more than 20 years, Ted was a jazz and creative music broadcaster for stations like WKCR in New York. Ted is the co-author of My Life in E-Flat, the Autobiography of Phil Woods, which earned him the 2021 Robert Palmer-Helen Oakley Dance Award for writing from the Jazz Journalists Association. The Jazz Journalists Association also honored Ted with its Lifetime Achievement in Jazz Journalism Award in 2016. Since 2015, Ted Panken has conducted several dozen public interviews for the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. You can find Ted's writings also on his blog, which is titled Today is the Question. Our challenger for this 77th episode of Jazzology is Bob Blumenthal. Bob Blumenthal was a contributing editor of the Boston Phoenix and a contributor to the Boston Globe. He was one of 6 commissioners who selected the White House Record Library and has written hundreds of album notes, of which 2 won Grammy Awards. Bob Blumenthal's book, Jazz: An Introduction to the History and Legend Behind America's Music, was hailed as the single best compact introduction to jazz currently available by the Wall Street Journal. Bob Blumenthal's second book, Saxophone Colossus, A Portrait of Sonny Rollins, was written in collaboration with photographer John Abbott. In 2005, Bob Blumenthal received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Jazz Journalists Association. And now let's get to today's Jazzology questions. And as our reigning champion, Ted Panken goes first. You ready, Ted?
I am. And Willard, I hadn't noticed that was Lester Bowie on your T-shirt. Is that Bravo.
Yes.
I should have brought. I just got a Roscoe Mitchell T-shirt from the Vision Festival last week.
Well, that was
if you wanted to play, I can go and change. But
all right, Ted, you ready?
Sure am.
All right, Ted. NEA Jazz Master, alto saxophonist, and band leader Kenny Garrett attended which of the following arts high schools in Detroit, Michigan? Would that have been A, the Detroit Academy of Arts and Sciences, B, Mackenzie High School, C, University Prep Art and Design, D, Communication and Media Arts High School, or E, Edward Duke Ellington Conservatory? Which of those schools did Kenny Garrett graduate from?
Wow. For me, jet lagged in the morning, just a little coffee. That's, you know how to hurt a guy.
Well, you know, we up the ante for the champions. You know that.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, I know that Kenny, I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm going to have to guess. And I do know, though, that Kenny Garrett, very young and maybe out of high school, went out with Mercer Ellington for several years. but that would be different, I guess, than the Edward Duke Ellington Conservatory. So I am going to have to guess most of the to just do the rumination a little bit. Detroit, there's one particular high school in Detroit that produced an inordinate number of important jazz musicians, that being Cass Technical, which had a very fine music program back from Tommy Flanagan through Jerry Allen, and there's so many of the Detroit musicians went there. So I assumed until this very moment that Kenny Garrett went to Cass Tech, but I guess he did not. I don't know the Detroit. I love Detroit, but I don't know the high school. So I'm going to take a guess, and I'm going to expect the symbol to be thrown at me. I'm going to say University Prep Art and Design.
C. Your answer is C. University Prep Art and Design. That is incorrect.
That's what I figured.
That is incorrect. I give you a hand for a good try, but that's incorrect.
Thank you for the hand. I appreciate it.
Now the question goes to Bob Blumenthal. Bob, NEA jazz master, alto saxophonist, and band leader Kenny Garrett attended which of the following arts high schools in Detroit? And C, University Prep Art and Design has been eliminated. Did Kenny Garrett go to the Detroit Academy of Arts and Sciences? Did he go to B, Mackenzie High School? Or D, Communication and Media Arts High School? Or perhaps E, Edward Duke Ellington Conservatory?
I am going to disqualify myself because the person who loaned me their laptop to allow me to get into this was sitting there because they said, okay, you can watch a question, and she's looking up on her phone. So it's not a fair fight. I will take you through my thinking, however, because I, of course, think of Cass Tech. I also think of Miller High School in Detroit, where Milt Jackson and Yusuf Lateef, among others, attended school. I'm not familiar with any of these, and I'm wondering if they're all schools within the Detroit area. Are they?
Yes, they are.
Okay. But I was told the answer, so not fair. I'm disqualifying myself.
All right, well, let's keep it at 0 then.
The answer, by the way, is Mackenzie High School.
Yes, it is.
Ah.
But we're at 0. Bob, you're up next.
Okay.
Pianist and composer Michel Camilo is a native of which of the following countries? Is Michel Camilo from A, Puerto Rico, B, Cuba, C, Venezuela, D, the Dominican Republic, or E, Chile?
Well, I know that Michel Camilo is not from Cuba, and I'm pretty sure he's not from Venezuela or Chile. So it gets down to Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic, and I believe that, in fact, Michel Camilo is from the Dominican Republic and has used some of the rhythms from his homeland in some of the compositions he's written.
That is correct. The wonderful pianist Michel Camilo is, in fact, from D, the Dominican Republic. Bob's up to a zip. Ted, you ready?
Gotcha, Willard.
All right, Ted. Ted, when vibraphonist Joe Locke relocated to New York City, who was the first NEA jazz master he worked with? Was that A, Barry Harris, B, Phil Woods, C, Kenny Barron, D, Ron Carter, or E, Tommy Flanagan? And I'll repeat that question. When vibraphonist Joe Locke relocated to New York City, who was the first NEA jazz master he worked with? Did Joe Locke work with A. Barry Harris, B. Phil Woods, C. Kenny Barron, D. Ron Carter, or E. Tommy Flanagan?
I see we have a bit of a Detroit theme here as well in the possibilities. Well, Joe Locke grew up in Rochester, New York, and he came to New York, I guess, in the late 80s. And the first recording, some of the very first recordings that he made were with Kenny Barron, including, I think, a duo record with Kenny, who is from Philadelphia, by the way, on Steeplechase Records. And so I am going to go with C, Kenny Barron.
That is correct. When the vibraphonist Joe Locke first came to New York, the first NEA jazz master he worked with was the great pianist Kenny Barron. So the score is tied at 2.
None of whom were NEA jazz masters at that point, because
at that time,
it had been
I thought it might be a trick question.
gotta get legalistic with Willard.
Okay, Bob, you're up next.
Okay.
Bob, the Italian jazz trumpeter Enrico Rava performed in bands led by which of the following jazz greats in the mid to late 1960s? Would that have been A, Gil Evans, B, Cecil Taylor, C, Steve Lacy, D, Carla Bley, or E, Lee Konitz?
This is tough because I think they're all possible. And some I just say to myself, was it the late 60s or was it the early 70s? But particularly the artists here like Gil Evans, Cecil Taylor, Steve Lacy, and I guess Lee Konitz as well, who frequently went to Europe. It wasn't a question of whether Enrico Rava came to the U.S. to work with someone. But having said that, because Steve Lacy was available to him the longest, I'm going to go with C, Steve Lacy.
And that is correct. Enrico Rava did indeed work with Steve Lacy in the mid to late 90s.
I might add that Rava did come to New York City for a couple of years, circa around 1970. So
right, and recorded with Roswell Rudd, if I'm not mistaken, while he was here.
All right, we got 2 jazzologists in the house today.
You might have to do a rounder. You might have to do a 3-rounder with us or something.
All right, Ted. Ted, you're up next. Ted, who was the musician who co-founded London's jazz education and advancement program titled Tomorrow's Warriors? Would that have been A, Courtney Pine, B, Gary Crosby, C, Shabaka Hutchings, D, Steve Williamson, or E, Orphy Robinson? And I should say A, Courtney Pine, saxophonist, B, Gary Crosby, bassist, C, Shabaka Hutchins, reed player, D, Steve Williamson, saxophonist, or E, Orphy Robinson, vibraphonist?
Oh, Willard. What was the name of the organization?
Tomorrow's Warriors.
Tomorrow's Warriors. Well, I'm going to assume that I don't have I don't have a specific. I'm going to have to contextualize a little bit. I'm thinking that you're probably referring to the late 1980s, when a number of British musicians who were somewhat influenced by Wynton Marsalis in this regard, like Courtney Pine and Steve Williamson, tenor, alto saxophonist. Steve Williamson also very influenced by Steve Coleman, and Orphy Robinson, who I think is a vibraphonist,
Yes.
were making quite a splash and getting recorded by the large British labels, and we're getting a fair amount of international recognition. So I'm going to, for that reason, I'm going to eliminate Shabaka Hutchings, who is a generation or two younger than them, I think. And I'm thinking, I can't assume anything about Gary Crosby, but I'm ashamed to say I'm not really familiar with him. Courtney Pine is the most visible of that group. He had the most press of any of them in the late 80s and early 90s, although, Steve Williams and Orphy Robinson got a lot of play in the U.S. as well. And so I'm going to go with the obvious, perhaps, but maybe, very well incorrect choice of A, Courtney Pine.
That is incorrect. And Bob with a chance to steal the question. Bob, who was the musician who co-founded London's jazz education and advancement program titled Tomorrow's Warriors? A, Courtney Pine has been eliminated. That leaves B, Gary Crosby. C, Shabaka Hutchings. D, Steve Williamson. Or E, Orphy Robinson.
Well, my worthy constituent, Mr. Panken, eliminated one of my possible choices. Because I think he's correct that it's a generational question, which to me brings it to a choice between Steve Williamson, who, as he said, was very prominent, and Shabaka Hutchings, who in a later period was very prominent. And I'm going to go for the younger artist and pick C, Shabaka Hutchings.
That is incorrect. The correct answer to that question is B, Gary Crosby. Bassist Gary Crosby with his wife, Janine Irons. They created Tomorrow's Warriors. That takes us to our mid-show break. And this week, we're spotlighting No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday, an in-depth 13-episode radio and live streaming documentary series celebrating Billie Holiday's extraordinary musical legacy. The program explores her early life, Billie Holiday's groundbreaking singing style, and the powerful impact her rendition of Strange Fruit had on the civil rights movement. Produced by award-winning Steve Robinson and written by yours truly, No Regrets is narrated by Rhonda Hamilton. The series features interviews with Angela Davis, Cassandra Wilson, Beth Roars, Andromeda Toure, Diane Reeves, Phil Schaap, Dee Dee Bridgewater, Dan Morgenstern, Renee Marie, and many others. All episodes of No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday, are available to free stream and can be accessed at savagecontent.com. And this week's album of the week is by a string ensemble known as the Hemphill String-Tet. The album is titled The Hemphill String-Tet Plays the Music of Julius Hemphill. And they're also playing the music of Charles Mingus as well, the Julius Hemphill's arrangements of Charles Mingus. Bob, tell us how you fell in love with jazz.
How I fell in love with jazz. When I was 13, got bar mitzvahed, had some cash, the first thing I wanted to do was go out and buy the Ray Charles recording What I Say, which part 2 of which was a big hit on radio. And I went to a store, I found an album, Ray Charles in person, that had What I Say on it, bought the album. It's not the hit record version, it's inferior to the hit record version, but the album also had The Nighttime Is the Right Time, Drown in My Own Tears, Tell the Truth, and 4 instrumentals with soloists like David Newman and Philip Gilbo or Marcus Belgrave. And I thought, oh, I really like this music. If it's jazz, I know it's serious. That's all I knew about it at the time. So if I go to my public library, I'll find jazz records. I'll find Ray Charles records. And they had one Ray Charles record. They also had a record called the Playboy Jazz All-Stars Volume 2. This is 1960. I'm 13 years old. There are no pinups in there, but just the Playboy bunny on the cover, like, oh, I got to check this record out and take it home, which introduced me to Ella Fitzgerald, Jerry Mulligan, Louis Armstrong, Brubeck and Desmond, Stan Getz, Milt Jackson, etc., etc. And that's when I started going to the record library every week to see who I could listen to. So that's how I got into jazz.
All right, Ted, you already answered this question quite a long time ago, actually. So I know that you are currently in Healdsburg, California, covering the festival out there. What do you enjoy about covering jazz festivals for magazines?
I live in New York City, in Brooklyn, and I get to hear a lot of music, although it does become an expensive proposition. So I like being able to, in a compressed period of time, hear a lot of music by people who are at the top of their game, in conjunction with one another, often curated by people like Willard, or here in Healdsburg, people like Marcus Shelby, or Detroit, or most of the good jazz festivals are curated by people who have an aesthetic about the music, and they program the festivals accordingly. Some are very large, some are different scales than others. So I like that opportunity. What is difficult, and as I get older, a little more difficult, is having to compress all that listening. It becomes like speed dating, I call it. You go to hear one band, then you go to hear another, then you go to hear, and zap, zap, zap. And it can be very exciting and stimulating, but it could also lead to a certain brain deadness, so to speak. This festival in Healdsburg is terrific.
So the bottom line is,
knows what he's doing.
The bottom line
knows what he's doing.
Support great jazz festivals. That's the bottom line. So that brings us to our next question. And Bob Blumenthal, you're up next. Bob Blumenthal, which of the following trumpeters was never a member of Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers? Would that have been A, Kenny Dorham, B, Woody Shaw, C, Charles Tolliver, D, Jim Rotundi, or E, none of the above?
Oh, well, we know Kenny Dorham was in the original Jazz Messengers quintet, so we eliminate him quickly. I'm wondering if Jim Rotundi was on the scene before Art Blakey passed away. And I'm guessing probably not. I think Brian Lynch may have been the last trumpeter in the Messengers. So it's down to Tolliver and Woody Shaw. And I do think that there was a brief period where Woody Shaw worked with the Messengers. So I'm going to go for C, Charles Tolliver.
That is correct. And there are actually, as you surmised in your process of elimination, there are actually two correct answers to that question. Because Jim Rotundi would have been a correct answer to that question as well. Okay. But you are correct. Charles Tolliver was not a member of the Jazz Messengers. Ted, the Grammy Award for Best Large Jazz Ensemble has been presented since 1961. Which of the following big bands, jazz orchestras, or large ensembles have never been awarded the Grammy Award for Best Large Jazz Ensemble? Would that be A, the Woody Herman Thundering Herd, B, the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra, C, the Jerry Mulligan Big Band, D, Rob McConnell and the Boss Brass, or E, Toshiko Akiyoshi Jazz Orchestra? Which of those have Which of those have
Never.
never been awarded a Grammy Award?
Well, Willard, you've got me again. I don't really pay attention to the Grammys. All my flaws are being revealed in this. All my flaws as a jazz nerd are being revealed here. Since 1961. Okay, let's. I can't imagine that the recording industry would not have given Woody Herman a Grammy at some point because he was just too much part of the establishment in the history of the people who give those awards, in my opinion. Ditto with Jerry Mulligan. Although I don't remember actually when Jerry Mulligan, I do, yeah, Jerry Mulligan's big band in the early 60s. And I particularly don't know the history of the Grammys in those first 10 or 15, 20 years. Rob McConnell and the Boss Brass, they probably got a Grammy at one point or another. They're very well organized. I know Toshiko Akiyoshi got it in the 70s, maybe for her first record. I'm not sure. Thad Jones and Mel Lewis, they had to have gotten a Grammy. That's my favorite big band, just about. And it would be perverse if they didn't get a Grammy. And the way my thoughts are going these days, the perversity of the thought of Thad Jones and Mel Lewis not getting a Grammy makes me think that they didn't get the Grammy. So I'm going to go with B, whether it's true or not.
That is incorrect. So Bob Blumenthal with a chance to steal the question. I'll repeat the question, Bob. The Grammy Award for Best Large Jazz Ensemble has been presented since 1961. Which of the following big bands, jazz orchestras, or large ensembles have never been awarded, and I repeat, never been awarded the Grammy Award for Best Large Jazz Ensemble? Would that have been A, the Woody Herman Thundering Herd? B, Thad Jones and Mel Lewis has been eliminated. C, Jerry Mulligan. D, Rob McConnell and the Boss Brass. Or E, Toshiko Akiyoshi Jazz Orchestra.
Well, I, like Ted, can't recall everybody who's won Grammys in every category going far back. And like Ted, I think any one of these great orchestras could have been overlooked when they were making great music, just the way it works. But I do have some sense of Grammy members and who they vote for. And I think they would vote for Woody Herman. And had I not known that Toshiko won a Grammy, I would think they would vote for her because she was based in L.A. In the 70s and 80s when she was really turning out great music on a regular basis. To me, it's a question of would they not give one to Rob McConnell because he's Canadian, or would they not give one to Jerry Mulligan because despite his West Coast connections in the 50s, he's thought of more as an East Coast guy who's not pulling on, the regular musicians who might vote in Grammys to put his band together. Although his concert jazz band albums in the early 60s, how could they not give those Grammys? Well, maybe whatever Ellington put out that year, So I'm going to go with C, Jerry Mulligan.
That is incorrect as well. The correct answer to that question is E. The Toshiko Akiyoshi Jazz Orchestra has not been awarded a Grammy.
I'm shocked.
That makes two of us.
I thought I had a vivid. Wow. Okay.
That's correct. Lord. All right, Bob, you're up next. Bob, NEA jazz master, composer, and bandleader Maria Schneider, from 2015 to 2019, performed her annual Thanksgiving week-long residency at what club? Would that have been A, the Jazz Standard, B, Sweet Basil, C, Joe Siegel's Jazz Showcase, D, the Dakota in Minneapolis, or E, Blues Alley in D.C.?
Well, I'm proud to say that I've been to all of these establishments. And I have to admit that I was worried coming in that there'd be some regional question, particularly involving New York, that would benefit my partner over here. But this one is, I'm sorry to say, did you say, where does Maria Schneider, where did she hold her residency? Is A, the Jazz Standard. I think she's even released music that was recorded at the Standard at one point. Could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about A, the Jazz Standard, and then between sets you could get some ribs. You know, it was
right enough there, and that is correct. It was the Jazz Standard where Maria Schneider.
The music that's been, some of the music that's been released from there is the Gil Evans Project,
right?
Particularly the current release Shades of Sound, which from 2014.
Right, your turn, Ted. Ted, you got to play some serious catch up here.
Depends on the questions.
Ted, the late jazz vocalist Lorez Alexandria made her first record for which of the following record labels? Was it A, Argo, B, King, C, VJ, D, Prestige, or E, Vocalion?
Well, here's another one that I'm going to have to guess. I haven't ever really followed Lorez Alexandria's personal biography. And unlike a lot of musicians of her generation, I don't know what part of the country she was from or what part of the country she settled in, which could help in deducing this. I do not recall. You know, I can't even go through a process of talking. I can't even go through talking about my thinking process. But something is telling me that it was the Chicago-based black-owned label VJ C.
That is incorrect, and that was a good guess, Ted, because she did have a Chicago connection as well. But that is incorrect. So Bob has a chance to steal the point. Bob, the late jazz vocalist Lorez Alexandria made her first record for which of the following record labels? Was that A, Argo, B, King, C, VJ has been eliminated, D, Prestige, or E, Vocalion?
Well, when you first posed the question to Ted, in my mind, I quickly eliminated Prestige and Vocalion. I don't even know if Vocalion was still, or if she was old enough to be recorded on Vocalion when Vocalion was operating. I think of her as a Midwest label, and I think she recorded for Argo at one point. So many artists, jazz, rhythm and blues artists, who recorded for King, which was a Cincinnati label. Too many of us jazz nerds, as Ted calls us, don't think of that. It's like you think of Eddie Lockjaw Davis with Shirley Scott. You don't think of the King recordings. You think of the Prestige recordings. So I am going to say B, King.
Mm-hmm.
And that is correct. That is correct. A successful steal, as we put it. So, Bob, you're up next with a commanding lead so far, I should say, but Ted does have a chance to catch up. Bob, saxophonist Alexa Tarantino, who has a new album and is currently a member of the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, earned her master's degree in jazz studies at which of the following institutions? Was that A, the Eastman School of Music, B, the New England Conservatory, C, Berklee College of Music, D, the Manhattan School of Music, or E, the Juilliard School?
Well, I happen to know that in addition to being a very good saxophonist and a member of the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra. Alexa also has a connection with a performing arts center in Rockport, Massachusetts, as sort of running educational programs for them. So the fact that she's in the New England area says to me she may have had a connection here in her student days, while she very easily could have gone to any of these schools. They all have great music programs. It gets me down to B, New England Conservatory, C, Berklee College of Music. And I am going to go in her case with C, the Berklee College of Music. I believe she is not a U.S. student, that she came from another country, and Berkeley tends to attract more than New England. And there was another reason that's slipping my mind now. But, Terry Lynn Carrington's program, which may or may not have been in existence when Alexa was in school. So I'm going to go for C, Berklee College of Music.
That is incorrect, and Ted has an opportunity to steal the point. Ted?
Well, I recently did a...
Hold on.
Oh, you're going to ask it again. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The saxophonist Alexa Tarantino, who has a new album and is currently a member of the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, just saw them the other night at the Kennedy Center, and she was definitely a member of the band for sure, a prominent member. Alexa Tarantino earned her master's degree in jazz studies at which of the following institutions? Would that have been A, the Eastman School of Music, B, the New England Conservatory, C, Berklee College of Music has been eliminated, D, the Manhattan School of Music, or E, the Juilliard School?
Well, last fall I had the nice opportunity to write a DownBeat profile of Ted Nash and Alexa. Alexa assumed Ted Nash's chair in the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, which is a very demanding chair. Ted Nash playing the flute parts. If you listen to Wynton's Democracy Suite, I think there's one track, I can't remember the name of the track, but there's this impossible flute part, and Alexa can nail that part. And there's a video of Ted nailing that part as well as alto saxophone. She had done a number of recordings for Positone, I believe, before that, maybe 3 or 4. She's actually, Bob, she's from Hartford, Connecticut,
yes.
and she went to that high school that all the, people at Hartford, Joel Fromm, Meldau, those people, and I'm pretty sure she went to the Juilliard School, considering the Jazz at Lincoln Center connection to Juilliard, to the faculty and to the jazz program at Juilliard. I could be wrong on this, but because I'm wrong on everything else on this particular episode, but I'm going to say E, the Juilliard School.
And that is correct. That is correct. Alexa Tarantino actually got her undergrad degree at Eastman, and she got her graduate degree at Juilliard. Right. And, in your process of elimination, when you talked about the Jazz at Lincoln Center's connection with Juilliard, that you were right on the money with that, because the Juilliard School seems to be kind of a pipeline to the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra these days.
Well, the curriculum reflects the pedagogy. Anyway, I'm sorry. Well, excuse me.
So our current score is Bob is up 9-3, and that seems like a significant shortfall on your part, Ted. But you have an opportunity to catch up with the bonus question. Yes,
is this the bonus question? Okay.
This is the bonus question. You ready, Ted?
Lay it on me.
All right, Ted, the late organist, Joey DeFrancesco, signed his first record deal at what age? Would that have been A, 14, B, 17, C, 19, D, 16, or E, 20. At what age did Joey DiFrancesco sign his first record deal?
I don't. I've written 2 features and 2 liner notes for Joey, and the name of his birth year is slipping out of my mind. I think though his first recording he signed with Columbia, I think, George Butler maybe, and I believe he's the same age either the same age or maybe a year younger than Christian. Anyway, this is going to be impossible because I don't remember his impossible to know quantitatively because I don't remember the year of his birth. And but I think he was 17. So I may now be lying down on my sword as the champion with B17.
And you were indeed lying on your sword. Because that means that Bob Blumenthal is our new Jazzology champion.
Ted, this won't make you feel any better, but if I had to choose, I would pick 17 as well. What is the answer?
The correct answer is 16.
16.
So was he younger than that when he played with Miles Davis, or was he 16 when he played with Miles?
I think he was 16 when he played with Miles as well. I think
Christian was 15. Christian was 15. That was on the Mike Douglas show. Miles came there.
Congratulations to Bob Blumenthal on winning our 77th episode of Jazzology. We encourage everyone to try your hand and play Jazzology. And if you or anyone you know would like to become a contestant on Jazzology, simply click on the link below and fill out the form. You must be 18 years old or older, and be sure to follow us on social media at Jazzology Trivia Show to get all the latest news and updates. Many thanks to Ted Panken and Bob Blumenthal and to everyone who joined us for our 77th episode of Jazzology. And Ted Panken, you have been a marvelous champion for a long time, but you've been dethroned. Remember, you can check out Jazzology every other Friday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you missed the show live, you can find the archive on the Savage Content YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.